Good afternoon, everyone. Well, we have a ways to go before phasing out fossil fuels, but researchers are trying to figure out how the shift to renewable energy will reshape geopolitical relationships. For about 3 centuries, access to oil and coal has shaped the rise and fall of great powers, and changing such a fundamental driver of the global pecking order could have multiple consequences. Joining me now to discuss is Bloomberg senior international affairs reporter Mark Champion in London, who's been digging into what countries are going to be fighting over when green energy dominates. Mark, thanks so much for being here. You write that more and more research is being done into the political impact of a global shift toward renewables. So let's talk areas of the world. Where in the world really appear to be in the best shape to dominate when it comes to renewables?
Well, I mean, everybody who looks at this ends up coming up with the conclusion that China will be one of the winners. That's kind of a no-brainer, I guess, and it speaks to one of the fundamental things that, there are so many variables involved, so people have very different approaches, but they all seem to agree on one thing, which is that if you are a large exporter of fossil fuels, you're at risk. And if you're a large importer, and you don't produce a lot of fossil fuels yourself, then you stand to benefit in principle. And China not only is on the right side of that equation, but it's also has the technology and the manufacturing prowess, and is already dominant in a number of areas, like producing 60% of all solar panels worldwide, and so on. So the short answer to that is, we don't know exactly who all the winners will be, but it's pretty uncomplicated for China. If you look at the US, it's very strong in technology and patents for renewables, so it has a lot going for it. On the other hand, the US is a big shale producer, produces a lot of oil, gas now, so it has a fair amount to lose on that score.
To that China point, I love how you write that the 60% of solar panels that are manufactured by Chinese companies, you call that, quote, a level of market influence that OPEC can only dream of when it comes to oil. I mean, imagine if if one area of the world controlled 60% of the global oil market. And is there any chance that between now and in the near future, other countries are going to be able to catch up? Just when it comes to solar panels, or does China have not just the manufacturing prowess, but also the rare earth materials that are needed to manufacture these?
Well, it's a good question, and there's a key distinction there. So for solar panels, yes, absolutely, the dominance that China has there is quite extraordinary. On the other hand, once you have your solar panels, you bought them, and you've built your solar park, you don't need China anymore. You've got them, you're producing energy the whole time. You don't have to have shiploads of anything brought to you like you do with oil. You have to have this constant flow of oil coming to you. So you are free, essentially. And there's a second point to that about solar panels, which is that China dominates not because it's uniquely able to produce these things. Others have gotten out of the market because they can't compete. In other words, China does it cheaper than everybody else at a pretty low margin. And if it were to try and use that for sort of geopolitical influence and leverage, pretty quickly other people would start to produce. So it wouldn't be very effective. On the other hand, you mentioned rare earth metals. That's a critical area where a lot of people are looking and saying, well, here's something that kind of replicates, oil and gas and so on. The key with oil, coal and so on, the key always was who has access, who has it in the ground. And the Chinese have, up to 90% of the production of the rare earths that are needed for things like, wind turbines and so on. So, at the moment, they have a dominance in an area where they could withhold it, as they once did to Japan. They in 2010, they had a dispute with Japan over some islands, and one of the things they did was to cut Japan's supply of rare earth metals, which was, had a big impact, and Japan is trying to escape that since.
So Mark, how does this change the Middle East? As has been reported for years, Saudi Arabia has been for years trying to move away from a fossil fuel dominated economy. But as you write in this piece, you say that a latter-day Saddam Hussein would have little reason to invade Kuwait to seize its solar parks, as he did in 1990 for its oil wells, for example. How does this reshape the Middle East?
Two good questions there. So the first is, in the long term, there's every reason to think that a widely distributed system of energy like renewables, where there's like a buffet of different kinds of energy that even households can choose from to become producers. That's a good thing, and that you won't have something like there just won't be a reason for Saddam Hussein to go and invade because the solar panels aren't buried under the ground in Kuwait. He can just buy them and put them on his own patch of desert. So that's one thing, but you have to get there, and the getting there is really tricky. Because if you're a country like Saudi Arabia, you have to decide, well, how am I going to make this transition? I have this vast, reliance on fossil fuels in order to create jobs and feed people and remain in power. And somehow between now and when this movable feast of a date for when people, demand for oil will dissipate, I need to diversify my economy and find another way. And the Saudis, to their credit, are making the effort. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do. It is proven over and over a difficult thing to do, and they are making an effort. They're trying to get into things like solar and hydrogen and so on. UAE, the United Arab Emirates, is a really good example of a country that an oil producer which has tried very hard and quite successfully actually to try and diversify its portfolio. Now, the question is, the Saudi and the UAE, they have the money and they could conceivably do it. It'll be difficult. But for countries like Algeria or Libya or many other oil producers in the Middle East, Iraq, Iran, it's going to be much, much harder for these countries to do that. And, in some cases, they are in any case very high cost oil suppliers. So as soon as the oil price gets into the secular decline, which is expected in this transition, then they simply won't be able to sell their oil, and all of a sudden they'll have no budget.
Bloomberg senior reporter Mark Champion. Mark, this is just a fantastic read. I encourage everybody to check it out. Really makes you think about the way that oil has shaped the world and the way that it won't moving forward. That's Bloomberg senior reporter Mark Champion joining us right now.